Hello again, it's Lock Noob, and this video is about what I think are the top 10 most essential pieces of lockpicking kits you can get if you're a beginner. I've thought long and hard about this. This is what I think are probably the top 10 things which a beginner lockpicker should probably look towards buying at some point. Now, this video contains no sponsorships, no paid endorsements. All the opinions and views are my own. Feel free to completely disagree with my choice of the top 10 in the comments down below. Would be really interested to know what you think. Have I missed out anything? Have I got it all wrong? Let me know. Right, let's start with my first choice, a cutaway lock. Now, this list is not in any particular order. I just think that for a beginner, some form of cutaway lock where you can see the inside, so in which you can have a go at pickings, have a look inside and see where you got to. Is what you thought you picked actually what you picked? Is there a reason why you can't set a pin? Is something holding you up? Is there a security pin in a place you didn't expect? I think that these cutaway locks can be really, really useful training aids for a new picker. And actually, if you get little bags of pins as well, you can pin them up to all sorts of configurations. And that'll save you having to buy lots and lots of different types of lock for a little bit longer. You can buy commercially made ones like these ones from Sparrows, or you can even make your own ones out of an old lock, a hacksaw and some files. I will leave a link to the video where I made this one below. At number 2, my second choice is the Detainer lock disassembly kit, also used to be known as the Huck lock disassembly kit. You can do an internet search for that. And I don't like to name things by name, but this is what it is, and there is only one kit that's quite like this and this comprehensive. It really doesn't cost an awful lot of money, and I don't know anything that's anywhere near the sort of value for a new picker. So yeah, while I don't want to pick out particular brands, in this case I don't have much of a choice. Now, individually in this kit, things like the pinning tweezers, the core followers, and a circlip removal tool which removes the circlips from the backs of locks. You can buy all of these at much better quality from other suppliers, but for about $30 you can get all of this in one kit. And well, I've been using this since the first few months of me ever starting to pick locks, and it's lasted really, really well. What do you get? Well, you get pinning tweezers, so you can pick out individual pins from inside the locks. You get your circuit removal tools. You get your plug followers like this, which obviously are there to push out the plug and stop your pins from falling into the lock and getting caught up. You've got segmented followers as well, which are really good to use. You've got something to hold the driver pins down as well, and you get these little core holders as well, so that you can hold the core of the lock inside. And yeah, it's just a really, really great kit for taking apart locks, seeing what's inside, progressively pinning them. It's a really good piece of kit for the price, and I don't know of a viable alternative to get all of this for anywhere near that cost. My third choice, Shims. Yep, these extremely thin pieces of metal. Again, wow, they can just save so much heartache. So if you look at most locks, there's often things like these grooves where a circlip is. There's cuts where the cam fits. There's cutouts at the bottom of the keyway. All sorts of places where you can easily get one of the driver pins in the top of the lock caught, and just by using a shim with your follower can make all the difference when it comes to making sure that you can take the lock apart without the whole thing jamming up and sometimes even breaking the lock permanently. There are even some locks, and you can see this quite clearly in the see-through padlock, which have a skeletonized core. I believe that's done to save money. Probably the millings of this are melted back down into brass and used again. I can't really think of any other reason why they'd do it, but some locks where you can't see inside, you don't know that it's going to be skeletonized until you gut it. These top driver pins can sometimes get caught in these gaps, these fins, in these skeletonized cores, and essentially jam the whole lock up, and most of the time that's the end of the lock. So definitely, if you are taking locks apart, getting yourself some shims like this, really, really, really useful. My next choice for essential kit, well, it's got to be some form of pinning tray. You can buy commercially made ones. You can 3D print your own one if you have access to a 3D printer or use a 3D printing service. You can even use your own skills or skills of a friend like this one to make your own custom wooden trays, all sorts of things. And if you're going to be gutting your locks, maybe to progressively pin them, say I want to take this lock from a 6-pin lock down to a 5-pin lock so I can practice with 5 pins, or I can just take out a pin. I can keep going, and these are going to stay in order in a tray and not fall out. And that's can be really important, just so you have something. Now, you don't even need to make or buy one of these trays. You could even just use something as simple as a piece of corrugated paper or folded paper like this, and that will do a perfectly good job at keeping your pins, whether the drive pins or the key pins, in order. But definitely it's worth having a decent pinning tray. So number 5 on my list, but actually should be the first thing that a new lockpicker should consider buying, is a decent quality lockpick set. Doesn't have to be the biggest, just a good quality pick set which is durable and you can get replacements for the parts. That's what I'd recommend. In fact, I've got a video on this whole subject which I'll link to below. Now, there's nothing wrong with starting out with really cheap, badly made lockpicks. If anything, they get you into knowing how the tools work and whether you actually like lockpicking to begin with. But once you have decided you want to take this up as a hobby, then going to pretty much any of the top manufacturers and looking at their kits is a good idea. Obviously, buy something within your budget, but if you can get something which has a large range of picks and has both tools for bottom of the keyway and top of the keyway tensioning, by which we mean bottom of the keyway or away from the pins, and top of the keyway or pin side. If you can get or expand the kit to have both top of the keyway and bottom of the keyway tensioners, then I think you're doing a good job. Like I said, pretty much get a decent kit from any of the top manufacturers out there, and I certainly would recommend the investment in the long run. Now, with all the excitement and attention Sparrow's new disc detainer pick has brought to, well, disc detainer locks, I actually would recommend buying, and they're so cheap, about $5, one of these cheap Chinese disc detainer picks, and they are designed to pick these cheap Chinese disc detainer locks. Here is a see-through one, and you can see how you're rotating discs to a certain degree as defined by these angle cutouts on the key. Now, there are so many of these disc detainer type locks out there that learning them, I think, is probably best done with a really cheap tool as well. Something which you can knock about a bit, bash around. If you break the tip, it doesn't matter an awful lot. You haven't spent tons of money on the pick tool, and it's certainly get you used to the feel of how disc detainers work and how you pick them and how much tension you use before you actually graduate to wanting to use a more expensive pick. And actually, if you modify the tip so it's a bit thinner, a bit smoother, cut out a little notch in the tip for profile keyways, and you can see the amount of difference that I've made in a side-by-side comparison. This actually isn't a bad tool, and if you do those modifications, well, you learn a lot about modifying tools as well. So I certainly think for a new picker, you see so many of these disc detainer locks around, and if you're interested in picking them, I certainly do think one of these cheap Chinese disc detainer picks, I think they're worth the money you spend on them from what you learn from using them. Now, this is a choice you might not have been expecting, but I have to say that I have found this to be an extremely useful thing to have as a new picker. and that is wiper blade inserts. Yep, just the inserts to windscreen wiper blades. They're usually made of quite a good quality stainless steel, although that can vary. And they come in all sorts of different thicknesses. You might be able to get some from when you change your own wiper blades, or get them from a friend, or maybe even a garage if you're friendly to them enough. You know, there's all sorts of things. And what you can do with that is you can just make loads and loads and loads of custom tension tools to fit into different locks, and you can see a range of different thicknesses and lengths of tension tool that I actually made and used for specific purposes just by carrying around just a length of flat wiper blade so that you can bend against the edge of a table or something in a pinch. Can actually be really, really useful to have in your in your pick kit. So yeah, absolutely, wiper blade insert for me is just a really good thing to have around as a new picker. Another choice which you might not have been expecting is some forms of abrasive equipment. Yeah, I know. Basically, I'm sticking wet and dry paper and files into the same category. Sorry about that, but I think it's important to have some material where you can modify and polish your tools when they arrive. So, you know, we talked about the Chinese Detainer tool. I mean, look how poorly some of these are actually finished as they come out of the factory. Some of these cheaper picks, and even some from reputable companies, can be quite sharp around the edges or roughly finished. And you know, a liquid, a file, and a little bit of polishing with some wet and dry paper can make the world of difference to taking a tool which is barely usable into maybe even your favourite pick. I've got a range of grit here, but you know, I always like to have some 400, 600, 800,000 and beyond wet and dry paper, so I can finish off those picks, take off the sharp edges, maybe put a bit of a shine and polish onto things. And it, you know, just having some decent fine grit wet and dry paper and some reasonable quality finger files. I used these even when I was a really new picker, quite a lot, and very early on into my sort of picking hobby. So definitely would recommend this. So we're at my 9th choice, and this is one which I had to really deliberate over as to whether I include it. I almost didn't, because these are dimple lock picks, and they're used for picking these dimple locks with the horizontal keyways and the strange flat keys. And the reason why I didn't almost include them was that I think that dimple locks can be a bit specialist. Maybe new pickers wouldn't really get into it. But then I thought, actually, when I was a new picker, I did come across dimple locks and I was interested. And I think that for a new picker, if you're willing to spend the time with some files and wet and dry paper, which we've covered earlier, finishing this set off, you get a really high quality and really good value pick set. Bear in mind though, you really do have to finish these picks off. When they start in the pack, they come extremely square and very rough and unfinished. But a couple of minutes with a file and some wet and dry paper, you can round those off beautifully. And you know, this is my favourite pick, and I've been using this for over 3 years, and it's still super strong and brilliant. So whilst I do think it's stretching that to put dimple locks, especially ones you have to finish off, in a essential kit for beginners video, these are really good, and I do think that it's definitely worth a beginner picker buying and finishing off if you want to get into dimple lock picking. Before we get to my last choice, I do want to just talk about this honourable mention, and I almost included this as an essential piece of kit, mostly because one of these see-through plastic padlocks actually got me into lock picking. I was able to see how locks work. I was able to use some particularly awful pick tools, it has to be said, to pick this lock and learn about how each one picks it in a slightly different way. And yeah, I really like this, but there are also a lot of downsides to using one of these locks, and that's because the plastic eventually starts to wear. You get a lot of movement in the core. They are incredibly easy to pick. They don't feel like real locks. In fact, they're massively divorced from the feel of real locks. So the value of this is purely in learning how a lock works, and in that regard it's a very educational tool. But a lot of people get confused and put off when they can pick this lock but not a real lock made out of all metal parts, and that can be very frustrating to new pickers. So I almost included this, but I was dissuaded otherwise. So yeah, it's an honourable mention because I actually really liked it when I first began picking to have one of these, but I can understand how it might actually, cause more trouble than it's worth. So here we are, my final choice. And, well, is there anything that I haven't covered which you think I should have done? Is it, by any chance, this? A little tabletop suction vise. Yep, this is, I think, one of the most essential pieces of equipment that a new picker can buy. It allows you to mount locks in all different configurations, whether it's in the vise this way up, or you can hang the locks underneath, or whether you want to mount a padlock inside, whatever it is, it allows you to stabilize the lock so you can learn lock picking. Not only that, you might see that this is actually covered in all sorts of metal swarf there, and that's because I use it for all sorts of projects. Like, I could actually hold a lock like this in there to do a cutaway like that. I could put in my dimple picks so I can file it. There's a million and one different uses for one of these vices. In fact, in some of my earlier videos, you'll see me pick locks in a vise just like this. They're very little money. You can buy them anywhere. They're all pretty much the same as far as I can tell. I take these to lock picking competitions to hold locks in while I pick them. I take them to lock sport meetups to meet other pickers, and I take this so that we can mount locks in a vise, because it doesn't take up an awful lot of space and it does fall down a little bit as well. So yeah, that's my 10th choice. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, do you agree with my top 10 most essential pieces of kit for new pickers, or have I missed something really, really critical out? You're frothing at the mouth with anger that I missed out that one thing which you valued really highly as a new picker? Let me know in the comments. Let's fight it out. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I'll see you all next time.